Alright, welcome everybody once again to our mini lecture for this week, but not so much on the topic or the content of this week. This is a mini lecture that is just going to cover all the information that you'll need for your task 3 or your third task, which is the essay. So I'm going to run through both how to do the assignment and the specifics of the assignment. Here, keep in mind that the specifics that I'm outlining now are in the year 2016. So if we reuse this for a future cohort, you'll need to check your assessment folder for the specific due details there, but everything else will remain exactly the same in terms of how to approach this assignment and what the essay is all about. But for my wonderful 2016 cohort, this task will be due in week 10 on the Friday, as always, by 4 p.m, so 7th of October. The submission, as always, is via the task submission folder. Now, the length of this task is listed as 800 to 1200 words. Now, for all intents and purposes, this is a 1,000 word assignment. Griffith have just brought in a policy where they always used to allow 10% over or under any particular word count, so that if assignment was 1,000 words, you automatically had 1,100 words, including in-text references. Griffith has since changed that policy this year, which is why I've actually changed the word count to 800 to 1,200 words to give you that room to move, so that you can go a little bit over there if you need to. But look, if you've got 1,000 words, that's perfect. If you've got less than 800, I'd consider putting more in. And as per Griffith policy, we do have to stop reading at 1,200 words, and that includes in-text references, but does not include the reference list. So the weighting for this task, it's weighted heavier than any of your other tasks. It's worth 25%, so 1/4 of your overall grade for the course. We marked out at 50. So this is a research essay. It's your classic sort of university essay. The way that you would normally consider at university writing essays. This is pretty much as classic as you get. So the overall aim of this task is to enable you to demonstrate your understanding of the 3 key sociological paradigms. You should well know these by now: functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionalism. So this shouldn't be too hard for you by this stage, because every single week at every topic we've looked at, we've gone through each of these paradigms. So what you'll be doing is the same thing that we've done each week, is you'll be applying these paradigms to an important social question. So first thing I'll say about this is you can apply all 3 paradigms. So your essay task might first look at whichever issue you're discussing from a functionalist perspective, then you might include a paragraph on conflict theory, and then one from a symbolic interactionalist perspective. Now keep in mind this is only a 1,000 word assignment, so really if you were going to cover each of the paradigms, it would be a very brief overview. You'd really only have about a paragraph or 2 at the most for each of the paradigms. So what you might prefer to do if you wanted to is just look at it from one perspective. You could just apply conflict theory, or you could just apply functionalism. Or, hey, you can do 2 if you'd like. You can look at conflict theory and symbolic interactionalism, or functionalism and conflict theory. Whatever tickles your fancy, you have the choice of what you're going to apply. Obviously, the ease of applying all 3 is that you can have a fairly brief overview of each, which might be easier, but you won't be able to go into as much depth. So the benefit of doing just one is that you can really sink your teeth into that particular paradigm. In terms of the what you're applying this to, will be to one of the topics, which I'll go through with you in a moment. So you'll need to choose your essay question and then apply the paradigm to it. So I'll go through what each of these questions are, and they're based on the week 7, 8, and 9 topic folders. So the first one, which applies to week 7 content, is: in what ways has higher education changed in the last 50 years, and what might this mean for the future? So we actually cover in our content folder how higher education has changed in the last 50 years. And we actually, there's a few links that we can share that sort of have people hypothesizing about what this might mean for the future. So I'll place a few of them for you up online. Look, it doesn't have to be, obviously any future predictions are going to be not perfect. So, this doesn't have to constitute the majority of your assessment, but really, leading on from the changes we've seen, what logically do you think might happen in the future? So have a go at just giving a bit of an outline of that. Some sociologists are thinking education in the future might be obsolete because of changes in technology. Others are saying actually education is going to look pretty much the same as it does now, whilst others still are sort of talking about the cost of education, meaning that we're going to have a return to an higher education system that really is just for the elite. And if you do look at the changes over the last 50 years, you can see how that might be the case in the future. The other topic related to our Week 9 content is how might mental illness be considered a social construct? So clearly here you can argue this from either perspective. In a way, the topic or the content for this particular week is looking very much how mental health is socially constructed. But of course, there is a lot of excuse my computer making announcements to me. There are quite a lot of made me lose my place now. Quite a lot of good reasons that we would consider that mental illness can be seen objectively. So you really do, with all of these questions, need to recognise that there are more than one position that can be taken, or there are opposing arguments to the argument that you take. So your argument might be that mental illness is primarily a sociological construct, but you'll need to recognise that to some extent it can be biologically or genetically based. The same thing with, is religion as a sociological concept ultimately a force for good or ill in society? If you wanted to argue that it's a force for good, that's fantastic. You can talk about all the charity work that religion does. You can talk about, all these, wonderful things that religion has achieved. But you'll also need to recognise that there are those who would argue that it is a force for ill in society. You could use things like pedophile priests or ISIS or things like that. So you don't have to be arguing exactly from both positions equally, like you had to for your points of debate assessment, but you do need to at least recognise the opposing view. So the Week 8 content, we cover both family and religion. So one of your essay questions here could be looking at how the Australian family has changed in the last 50 years. And again, this is a really broad topic. You'll need to focus in quite a bit for any of these topics. So you might look specifically at how the family changed as the product of feminism, or you might want to look specifically at same-sex marriage, or you might want to look at quite a few different issues and just cover them all briefly. But naturally, there is enough content here with any of these questions. You could write an entire PhD on these. So the real trick for this essay is within 1,000 words, knowing what you're going to focus on so that you can cover that in a really clear and coherent way. One last thing I will say about this final question, is religion as a sociological concept ultimately a force for good or ill in society? I just want to really highlight to you there as a sociological concept. This is not a theology or a religious essay. We're not asking whether or not God is real. We're not asking, you might have a faith, and that's fantastic if you believe, whatever your particular faith believes, that's fine. But you need to keep those opinions separate from what we're looking at in sociology. Whether or not Jesus was the Son of God, or whether or not we are reincarnated in line with Hinduism, is irrelevant for this assignment. What we're actually looking at is the manifestation of that religion. So we're looking at churches, or at how people enact their religion in society, not at the religion or the truth or falseness of the claims. So the next step you choose, once you've chosen your topic, your next step is to research your topic using a range of quality sources. So, for example, peer-reviewed literature, ABS statistics, government policy documents, or secondary sources such as textbooks. Now, there's a minimum of 8 references here, but word to the wise, whenever your convener tells you a minimum of 8 references or 10 references, whatever, they're usually wanting more. 8 is the bare minimum. So I would suggest a few more would be good. It's only 1,000 words though, so 12 references is probably fine. If you get really excited and really stuck into the topic, then go wild, put in heaps of references if you want, but you will be limited by the length of the essay, really. Now, when we say another sort of word to the wise on this criteria here, we're not just marking you on the number of references you include. Clearly, you have to have at least 8 scholarly sources. But you're also being marked on how well you use them, how well you integrate them into your paper, and the range. So you might have heard about this secondary sources or primary sources. We'd like to see a mix of both. So a primary source is usually your traditional sort of journal article where, say, an experimenter has gone along. They've completed an experiment, they've analysed the data, and they write up the results. They are the one who conducted it. They are the one who are writing up the results. So that paper that they have written is a primary source. Now, say I come along and I get a whole heap of these primary sources, and I put them all together to create a textbook, such as your Think Sociology textbook, and I say, Marx argued this, and Weber argued this, and Durkheim argues this. Well, that textbook that I then publish, or like your published textbook for the course, is now a secondary source because I was not the one who was saying those things, or your textbook is not the people who have conducted the research here. They are merely reporting on other people's research. So in that way, they are a secondary source. So for this assignment, I would recommend you do use your sociology textbook. There's one of your references done already. Naturally, that's going to be relevant for the topic that you're looking at. So your sociology textbook is one good one. You can look at some other secondary sources as well. And I would, so if you're looking at 8 references there, you've probably got 2 secondary sources, 2 primary sources. So go straight to the peer-reviewed journal articles. Find a few relevant sources from them. And then, another 2 references, I would actually look at some ABS statistics. Now, there's a link to the ABS website on your course page. It's not hard to find. Getting, data right from the source is really good. That's what sociologists do. So I would recommend using a couple of ABS sites. Government policy documents are also really relevant for a essay like this. As you know, we just had the census recently, so the government's, regularly gathering data on the Australian population, and so for things like religion or the state of the family or things like that, having some statistics to back up your point is going to be really helpful. So it's up to you. You might find a couple of extra good secondary sources or extra good primary sources. So it's not that you have to have 2 secondary, 2 peer-reviewed, and 2 ABS or anything like that. But you do need a range. You do need a couple of different sorts of sources for the task. You'll then write your 800 to 1,200 word essay, or for all intents and purposes, your 1,000 word essay. And in the essay, your main thing is that you're developing a clear argument in relation to your essay question. So you'll be taking a position, as I was saying before. Overall, I believe, or not I believe, because it's not first person. Overall, based on the data, it is clear that religion is a force for ill in society. Or overall, based on the data, it is clear that mental health, probably don't say it is clear, that's probably not that well worded, but this essay will argue that mental health is largely a social construction. So you're taking a position here. Doesn't have to be your personal position. It's not really a reflective piece. We don't really want to hear your personal journey for this. This is a classic university assignment, so it is purely objective and purely based on evidence. So once you've developed your argument, you'll be explaining how any or all of the 3 sociological paradigms are relevant to the topic. So interpreting the topic from that perspective. So again, if you're looking at, say it was religion again, and you're looking at conflict theory, the conflict theory position on religion, you're looking at Karl Marx, and he was quite critical of religion. So they would see it as a form of power, from the powerful oppressing the weak through religion. So that would be the position that conflict theory would take. That's just one of many examples. So you'll need to, when I say you're taking a position, it's not just personal opinion, it is backed up with evidence. So You're linking in your theories and your research. So here's the data. Here's what this theorist thinks about it. This is the evidence. So it's all, everything you should be saying should be based on the facts. So the marking criteria here, and we've started to touch on some of this already. If you look at all 5 of these, you can really separate out that the first 2 are really just about the main guts of your actual task here, and the last 2 are about how well it's presented. So the very bottom there, you've got organisation and presentation. That is your classic spelling, grammar, language use, sentence, paragraph, how well it's written. Now, I can't stress enough, how well an essay is written is basically directly relational to how many times you've edited it. You might have a lot of great ideas, and I can't tell you how many times it's broken my heart to see students who have, such a great understanding of a topic and have gotten really excited about an assignment, but haven't taken that time to express those ideas or get those great ideas from their head down onto the paper, and ultimately it results in an essay that isn't very representative of the student's understanding, and they don't get the great marks. So do take the time to make sure this is expressed well. We'll talk a bit more about this in the rest of the mini lecture. The 4th criteria there is solely related to your referencing. So as I was just saying before, the range of sources you've used. Well, now I just have to correct that. It says minimum of 5 references there. That's a hangover from a previous when this was a mini task, so it's actually a minimum of 8 references. I do apologise for that little typo. So you want a wide range. You want good quality references. They need to be professional or academic, and how well you use them. So the topic comprehension, this is about how the very first criteria there, this is about how well you've covered that topic. So keeping in mind, again, these are very broad topics. If you're arguing whether religion is a force for good or ill in society, you're not expected to talk about all religions in all places and all times throughout human history. But you are expected to have a decent grasp of religion as a sociological concept. If you're talking about how the family's changed in the last 50 years, we would expect that you'd be able to cover some of those key issues around that, and that your comprehension, it's clear to us from marking this that you do understand this topic well. The second one there, analytic capability, basically equates to how well have you applied the sociological paradigms. And again, another heartbreaking moment when I read a student who's written an excellent essay, they've made a really compelling argument, really did understand the topic, well written, well researched, but no mention of the sociological paradigms, and unfortunately you get 0 in that criteria if that's you. So you do need to be making it clear that you understand how to apply these paradigms. The middle criteria here I'm addressing last, because in my mind, this criteria 3 really ties everything else together. It's unlikely that you'd be able to get a good mark in criteria 3 if you haven't also gotten a good mark in 1, 2, 4, and 5, and vice versa. The logic of the argument is really how well does this all fit together? Is it a well-constructed argument? Have you tied in the references well? Have you talked about the topic well and analysed it well from the different perspectives or from your sociological paradigm? So this really is just, does the essay flow? Does it seamlessly all link together? And your minimum reference is 8. So a bit of a lighthearted way to start the actual how to do this assignment. What we don't want to see is someone getting feedback like this. I don't understand why my grade was so low. How did I do on my research paper? Actually, you didn't turn in a research paper. You submitted a large, awkward, random assemblage of sentences. In fact, the sentences you apparently kidnapped in the dead of night and forced on this violent and arbitrary plan of yours clearly seemed to be placed on the pages against their will. Reading your paper was like watching unfamiliar, uncomfortable people interact at a cocktail party that no one wanted to attend in the first place. You didn't submit a research paper. You submitted a hostage situation. Bit of lighthearted there. I promise all of you there is no way you will get feedback like this. We're much more polite than that. We wouldn't say anything quite so cruel. But it is true that sometimes when markers mark your essays, we do cringe a little bit in terms of how well the essays are constructed. So the point of the rest of this mini lecture is to help ensure that you never do get feedback from any of your markers or tutors, to make sure that your essay flows. So, before you submit your essay, have a look at this checklist, and you'll see these relate directly to the criteria, the 5 criteria I just covered. So, have you shown you understand the key issues related to your topic? Have you applied the key sociological paradigms? Have you shown a logical flow of ideas with support from research? And have you used a wide range of resources with a minimum of 8, explaining the key concepts? And have you edited it? Have you given attention to presentation, to the grammar, the referencing, the spelling? So, understanding the topic and linking it to theory, you need to ask yourself a few questions. So, what are the key issues that you need to understand? And again, it's about limiting down to what are you clearly going to focus on. What theories are naturally going to link to your topic? Now, you could apply any of these paradigms to any of these topics, so there's no right or wrong here. But for many people, they'll go, oh, yeah, look, that, as I was saying before, the Marxist theory just, ties in so well with an argument that religion is a force for ill that I'm really going to focus in on that. Or, whatever it might be. Symbolic interactionism, in my mind, just explains the changes in the family over the last 50 years so well. That's what I'm going to focus in on. Or, again, you can cover all 3. So, the trick to this, though, is, and you find this a lot in first year, is that a lot of people get stuck on describing. Particularly with this assignment from past experience, I've seen that people get all excited about the ABS data and they get this great amount of data, and they'll just go, the Australian family has changed because there's a higher divorce rate now, or this many same-sex couples, which is all really relevant information. But inevitably, the markers comments you'll get from that is, and so, or what does this mean? Or please explain this. Can you interpret this from a certain angle? So what you're actually needing to do is to move from simple description to synthesis, so tying in the different pieces of facts, and evaluation. So evaluate. And there's a handy little diagram here that you can use to help you with that. As I say, those sort of facts here and there, if you look at churches have raised this much money for charity, or you look at, whatever it might be, the education system has increased in price. That's relative facts, but it's really just the start. It's the descriptions. This is your what, your when, your who, and your where. How much money does it cost, or what is it? What's happening here? When is it happening? Who's it happening to? Just the facts, and you do need them to anchor everything. What you need to do is move beyond that to asking, well, why might this be the case? What are the reasons for this? How is it done? What if it was done a different way? That's where you're starting to analyze. You're not just giving me the stats. ISIS killed this many people in the last how many years. You're moving on from that and analyzing this is, explained by, or this ties in with my central argument. And then your final stage there, or the highest level of learning here, is evaluation. The what if, or the so what, or the what next. You're actually making some sort of a judgment call based on the facts you've explored. Again, not from your personal perspective, but, does it logically flow? So I'll show you these topics again, and I've touched on the religion question and family whatnot, and the education system there. So I'm actually going to focus here on how mental illness could be considered a social construct, and see how we might apply that move from the what, the where, the how, and the why up to those more evaluative questions. So if you're looking at, does mental illness, is it a socially constructed topic? Sorry, is it a socially constructed phenomena? You really need to break it down. What does that even mean? So you look at your key issues. So how much or what aspects of psychological diagnoses are actually socially constructed? Because again, like all of these topics, it's a contentious point. There is more than one perspective on this. It's very unlikely that you could make a pure argument that mental health isn't at all socially constructed, or is completely socially constructed. Same as you can't say really religion is completely good or completely ill when you look at the evidence. So you're wanting to know, so break down some of these terms. What does mental illness actually mean? And we know from the content from week 9, that mental illness is a diagnosis according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders. What does that mean? I mean, that's a medical model. Is it a thing in itself? I mean, even by defining it, you're starting to answer this question. And, if you are using tricky terms, it's good to even define them in the paper. So who is actually diagnosed? And more importantly, in this case, who actually does the diagnosing? So you've got to be a qualified psychologist. So we'll, look at that in relation to some of the content we explore in the health lecture or the health content week. We look at the dominance of the Western medical model system and, the power structures that are in place there. So what are the causes of mental illness? And like I say, there's a lot of biological evidence for certain mental disorders, but look here at a really classic example for social construction of mental illness, the fact that only about 50 years ago, homosexuality was considered to be a diagnosable mental illness. And it's clearly not now because social attitudes have changed. So clearly right there, you've got a great example of, how mental illness can be socially constructed. So when and where does mental illness take place? These, again, are all your factual questions. But then you're starting to go, okay, analysing it, critiquing it. Why does it happen? Why are we actually diagnosing people in the first place? You look at some of Foucault's arguments, and he would say, well, it's a form of social control, same thing as we use the legal system for. What if mental illness isn't socially constructed? This ties into what I was saying before in terms of recognising that there's another perspective out there. So why why is mental illness socially constructed, and how could it be explained using the sociological theories? And you're moving to those evaluation questions at the end there. And of course, these questions can be applied to any of the topics. I'm just giving you one example from one perspective. So an example here of a lack of critical analysis is what I was saying before in terms of just giving the facts. So you might find this great article by Sherman that says, hey, overall the article's sort of arguing that juveniles that are more inclined not to obey the rules set by their parents or by communities, so people who are more free thinkers, are actually more likely to be diagnosed with a mental illness. I mean, that's a really relevant tidbit of information. But there's no critical analysis in this. That's just a description. Okay, there's Sherman's finding. Wonderful. What you then do is you build on that by saying, so in other words, or this means that, or this is because, or it links to, how does it support your hypothesis or go against your hypothesis? You might want to give an example. That's once you're starting to use those sorts of hooks, explaining it, this is because you're starting to get to that critical analysis side of things. So here we've got a good synthesis. What you do is you start to try and synthesize the literature. So here both Smith and Jones, you can see Smith there's actually writing in the future. He's a very futuristic author. There's a typo there on 2208. We mean, I think, 2008. So both Smith and Jones agree. However, Brown states that. So, from a functionalist perspective, Black would say. So here what's really important, and a mistake that I see often in first-year students, is you find this great article and then you just write a whole paragraph from one author's perspective. What is better to do is to find other articles that agree. So you're actually tying in and synthesizing 3 or 4 different articles that all say the same mark. When I used to print out the articles, do piles. This paper is arguing for these 4 stack of 4 or 5 papers here are all arguing, they support my hypothesis. These 4 or 5 articles completely, take the opposing view, and these 4 or 5 articles over here, they're somewhere in the middle. So I would actually organise my papers physically. You don't have to do it that way, but what you're doing then is you're able to sort of present groups of articles, and you're synthesizing a body of literature rather than just looking at one paper. And if you do that, you'll get the big ticks going, good synthesis. So you should be following a logical flow and structure in your essay. So use those critical questions that I had there before to help structure a logical flow of your ideas. Now, those questions there that I use as examples are supposed to help you get thinking. You don't have to have every paragraph answering every single one of those questions. They're really just, if you get stuck, come back to them. So remember to start from fairly general ideas and then narrow down to the specifics. Keep your word count in mind. With 1,000 words, you're going to have around 200 of that at least dedicated to your intro and conclusion. So really, you've got probably under 800 words to really get stuck into this. So work out what you are able to focus on. Do a plan ahead of time, because you don't want to have, used up your entire word count just touching on one little bit. And then realize you can't cover anything else, but you've done all this research on it. So keep that word count in mind all the time. If it's going to be, for 1,000 words, it's going to be really tight. It's going to be really tricky to make this, tight and focused. Use transition signals between and within paragraphs. Now, that is the way to guide your reader through ideas. I mentioned before about people who have this fantastic understanding in their minds, but it doesn't translate to the paper. And the reason for that, this is a process that all academics have to go through. I've got plenty of ideas in my mind, but trying to write a research paper is hard work, because you've got to guide the reader. We're not aware, markers are not aware, or the reader is not aware of what you know. So trying to translate that to paper, you need to guide them. And the way to guide them, the lamp or the light that you're using to guide them through this dark maze of your ideas, are transition signals. So things like on the other hand, or in addition, or a second challenge is. Make sure that these transition signals are correct, because when we see the word however, we're going, okay, here's an opposing point. Whereas I do see sometimes people use a word like however just arbitrarily. So it might be, religion is a force for good in society. However, churches do raise a lot of money for charities. That's not a however, that's a because. So make sure that you're using the correct transition. In addition means I'm now supporting that argument. However means I'm opposing it. A second challenge means you're listing certain things. So this is how you guide your reader, and make sure you use the correct essay structure. The reason we maintain or have retained this assessment year in and year out in this course is because it's essential in your first year that you do learn how to write a good essay. It's an essential skill for a practitioner, and certainly an essential skill for a university student. So in terms of the structure of an essay, you might have heard about this, the funnel shape of writing essays. Now, this is much more prevalent in particular research articles and literature reviews. So you generally start with a very broad general statement and dive into that, getting deeper and deeper until you end with something very, very specific by the end of your literature review or your introduction. For the purposes of this first year assignment, I'm quite happy if your introduction really reads more like an abstract or a table of contents. What that means is you're just following a very sort of formulaic structure. So you might start with a broad sort of opening sentence, but this is not a horror story. This is not a murder mystery. I don't want twists and turns in the essay. We should really know exactly what the essay is going to cover from your paragraph. So it really is as simple as saying this essay will discuss, or some broad sort of introductory sentence, and then your topic sentence. This essay will discuss whether sociological, or this essay will argue that mental illness is primarily socially constructed. That is, even though it's not exciting, that is a beautiful sentence to have in your introduction, because it tells the reader exactly what your topic is. If that's not in there, we're lost. You can then go pretty much straight down the line. It will do this by first exploring functionalism, then looking at conflict theory. It will then wrap up, with whatever it might be. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach this assignment, and the structure is really up to you. So as I mentioned before, if you're going to look at all three paradigms, you might go, the introduction, you might go first paragraph, I'm just going to look at how the family's changed in the last 50 years. I'm going to sort of introduce the topics. We're going to look at same-sex marriage and single-parent families and a higher divorce rate. Then paragraph 2, I'm going to interpret this from conflict theory. Paragraph 3 from functionalism. Paragraph 4 from symbolic interactionalism. And there's your structure. Another thing you might want to do instead is go, look, this whole thing is going to be from a conflict theory perspective. So first we're going to look at how the family has changed all the time, mentioning conflict theory. First we're going to look, first paragraph is going to look at feminism. Then the next paragraph's going to look at same-sex marriage. The next paragraph's going to look at single parenting. And the final paragraph's going to look at the no-fault divorce. And then I'm going to sum it up. So there are so many different ways you can structure it, but you'll notice in every one of those examples, each paragraph is its own sort of idea, and you're developing the argument as you go. So if you write that, this is the trick to writing essays, write your paragraphs first, and then at the end, write your introduction and conclusion, because if you've already got your structure of your essay down, your introduction and conclusion will write themselves. They are really just the outline of what the paper's going to have. So no point writing an introduction first, because then as your essay develops and changes, you're going to have to go back and rewrite the intro anyway. So collecting and organising ideas. So the theme here, if we're looking at social norms, we're looking at mental illness being a sociological concept. Well, we're looking at these themes here, social norms and mental illness. So we might be looking at, that little piece of information from Sherman before, the different family types that people have, whether they're supportive of deviance or whatnot. We might have some general information and statistics to link to mental illness and social norms. We might have another article looking at changes in government legislation. I mentioned there before the no-fault divorce. Basically what you've got on this little slide here is a whole bunch of different tidbits of information. As you conduct your research and you summarize your articles, you're going to be going, okay, here's all this information. Now, what on earth do I do with all this? We've got Smith and Jones, labeling, we've got, this might link to this, and you start with this sort of hodgepodge of different ideas. Now, what you need to do here is turn, that hodgepodge there into a clear paragraph. So what we're doing here, if I'll just come back to that last slide, you're going to introduce your theme. You're then going to look at your general stats. You're then going to look at your, say what's relevant to that, and then you move on to new topics. So here you can see how we've turned all those little snippets into an actual paragraph. So there is a lot of evidence to suggest a link between deviation of social norms and mental illness. So there's your topic sentence for this paragraph. So I know now reading this that that's what this paragraph is going to be about. We've got that article we found before. Sherman argues that juveniles who do not obey the rules set by their parents and community are more likely to be diagnosed with mental illness. There's your factual information. We haven't got to the so what yet. Now, a bit more factual information here, and this is where your stats can come in. Brown states that recent research into mental health diagnoses also showed this percentage of children from this particular community, whatever it might be. But here you've got, a bit of fact. You've backed it up with some statistics, but you haven't stopped there because you've used this wonderful anchor here. This seems to suggest that the rate of diagnosis differs based on community values. So now you're summarizing that data, telling us what it means. Then you're linking into your next idea. However, there may be other factors at work in the way that mental illness is perceived in various cultures. So, that's not really a very good linking paragraph there, admittedly, but now you're going one factor, you've said there'll be other factors, that needs to be examined is the impact of government policy. So I said it's bad link because, in various cultures, but so you really should have said something about government policy, but the impact of government policy there, and now we know, okay, this next paragraph's about government policy, how that's changed this particular social thing. So really that's what you're doing when you're writing a summary. You're getting tidbits and facts of information, and then you are integrating them into a well-written essay. So same sort of thing, a nice structure to follow here, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but most academic paragraphs follow a basic writing pattern. Now, you don't have to follow this for, it's not a set thing that you must do, but really it's a good sort of structure to anchor you. You generally always start with your topic sentence. You provide your background, theory, or data. Sometimes you do a real-world example. It's not always necessary, but that's, perhaps data or relevant evidence is what goes in next. Then you link it to the example, or you start to justify explaining why it's important using those links. This could mean, thus this illustrates, this example shows. This is where your critical analysis comes in. So, of course, you need to present the data first before you critically analyze it, and then you conclude it. You sum up. And most of academia, you tell people what you're going to tell them, you then tell them, then you tell them what you've told them. That's generally how it goes. So your topic sentence has to start first to tell people where they're going. You then have to provide your evidence and your data. You then analyze your data. You then tell them what that means and what you've told them. A couple of other little hooks here, and this is really just for a bit of a light-hearted break. It has long been known usually means I didn't look up the original sentence. A definite trend is evidence. The data is practically meaningless to me. In my experience means once, in case after case means twice, in a series of cases means 3 times. Or it is hoped that this study will stimulate further investigations in this field means I quit. This is a light-hearted sort of a look at what academics mean by certain sentences. Certainly we hope that's not the truth, but it does make, again, a relevant point that academic writing is often about the way we present ourselves. And so writing in a formal sense is really, really important. That doesn't mean having long, fancy words and trying to sound very super intelligent from 10-syllable words. It usually just means saying things in a very professional but very simple way. So a couple of little writing tips to finish us off with. We've mentioned this already. Make sure there is a topic sentence. Let us know what you're going to say. It's not a murder mystery. We want to know what's coming up. Introduction and conclusion are really just a summary of everything you've said in the paper, so write them last. Write in third-person tense, particularly for this essay. This is objective. This is not a personal reflection piece. I know in many of your social work and human services courses, you're able to write from the first person, and some academic articles write from the first person. But for this particular essay and for a lot of academic work, you must write objectively in the third person. My background's in psychology, and it was beaten into me from first year that you never use the word I. It's a dirty word. It's not about your opinion. Why are we writing in that way? Well, you write in that way because then what you're actually looking at is not your opinion. You're just basing your conclusions on evidence only. Some people also seem to jump tense a little bit. Try and maintain that past tense tone as well. Where relevant. Third person past tense, remain objective. Don't get carried away with your personal opinion or emotion. A lot of these topics are, that we learn about in social theory, they are emotional topics. You are probably in the professional fields that you are because you are passionate about this stuff. So it's really great that you're passionate. I even encourage you to follow your passion. But if you don't think you can remain objective on the topic that you're exploring, I would recommend changing topics. The reason for this is because you'll get marked down. Like, I admire the passion, but passion is irrelevant when you're looking at science. It really is just what's the objective truth. So you could be, really, really passionate about, I'm trying to think of an example I haven't used yet, like myself, I'm extremely passionate about higher education system and the changes that have been made, and I feel very frustrated that the government's defunding the education system. But if I then write a paper about this, which I have, you'll say due to government changes in how they funded the education system, the results that we're getting are A, B, and C. And this is objectively difficult for universities to maintain this quality of education. You just say it very matter of fact because you let the evidence speak for itself. If I go, it is a travesty, it is just absolutely appalling, and I'm so upset about the education system, any of my colleagues will read it and go, settle down. Okay, that's great, you're upset, but who cares? Like, what does your upset mean? So, remain objective. You might be really passionately for religion or really passionately opposed to religion, but you must remain objective. Avoid rhetorical questions. This is actually a pet hate of mine. I know in some circumstances, such as lectures or certain newspaper pieces, editorials and whatnot, the rhetorical question is an academic device. So, what have the changes been to the family in the last 50 years? But is depression really just a biological condition? ? Don't use that in academic writing. Definitely don't use it in this essay, because ultimately the response you'll get from your markers is, I don't know. This is not a conversation. You're supposed to be telling me. Now, what you'll find with these rhetorical questions is you can say the same thing, you just rephrase it as a sentence. So, but is depression really just a biological condition? You can rephrase that too, but it could be argued that that depression is not just a biological condition. So just be matter of fact. State it, don't ask it. And of course, avoid one-sentence paragraphs or really long paragraphs. If you've got one-sentence paragraph there, that little guy is lonely, give him some friends. Look, roughly speaking, 3 sentences is about as short as you want a paragraph. I think 7 is probably the max. I'd say most paragraphs should be about 5 sentences. Hey, again, this is not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes you've got more you need to say on that topic, so they're going to be longer paragraphs. Sometimes it's a very brief paragraph, that's fine. But if you've got a paragraph that's taking up an entire page, you've got to cut that down into about 2 or 3 different ideas. A paragraph is a set of ideas. If it's all covering one topic, break it into subtopics. So a paragraph, keep it not too long and not too short. Little practical things as well. Know your where from where. They're playing with their dog over there. Again, spell check will not pick these up, but your marker will, because this is where it's really important to read your paper to a family member or friend. Get them to read it out loud, because when you make a mistake and you've got the wrong there or where, when you go back and you're editing it and reading it, you often miss it because you know what you're wanting to say. But a stranger or your marker will not know what you're wanting to say, and it can be really jarring reading what would otherwise be a really great paper. Can actually, these are things that knock you down on your marks more than that really should, because if a marker's having to stop and translate the wheres from the wers, they're not getting the flow. They're not immediately picking up your ideas, so it can really hurt you. So get somebody else to read it out loud, and if they're not understanding it, it's not because they're stupid and you're smart. It's because you haven't expressed it well. Know your ownership apostrophes. Get your punctuation right. These are really simple things, but it's really important in academic writing that you've mastered them, because if you haven't got them, markers will be overly critical of those sorts of things. Know your APA. For example, whether to put names, authors' names in brackets or not. If you're saying Marx argues, you go Marx, 1849 in brackets argues. But if you're just referencing Marx, both the Marx and the 1849 go in brackets. Really important to know that, because brackets basically mean we don't read it out loud. So if you've got Marx in brackets, we're not going to be reading that, so it will make sentences look funny. Refer to authors by their last name only. So Marx states, or Botherbottom states, not illustrious psychologist and medical researcher James C. Botherbottom states. You're wasting your word count. I know in some contexts people do that, but no, in academic writing, just the last name and the date. You don't have to give us a whole history of the person. Avoid colloquialisms in formal writing. So, like a bat out of hell, or, just casual sort of slang language. It doesn't fit in academic writing. But again, as I said before, write in plain English. Don't try and make things sound more complex. When you're reading a lot of research articles, you'll see that people do write some, especially sociologists, write some quite complex stuff, but that's come over years and years of working in that particular research domain. Trying to sound complicated just makes you sound convoluted. So best advice I got in my first year of uni was, if a sentence can be shorter, make it shorter, say it straight to the point, try and make it as clear as you can, because you're already dealing with some very complex topics here. So the sign or the demonstration that somebody understands a topic is that they're able to explain it in plain English. Get someone to read your work aloud. I've mentioned that already. And edit. Good writing does not come from a first attempt. The more you edit, the better it is. I could pretty much predict my marks by my second undergraduate degree. I could predict the mark I would get for any essay based on how many times I'd edited it. If I'd quickly whipped it out over the week leading up to the due date, I was pretty much assured of getting a credit. If I had finished it well before that and been able to edit it for the week leading up, I was pretty much assured of a high distinction. So time is everything. So 3 to 4 weeks before, you should understand and read the criteria sheet. You should be listening to this lecture capture, so well done if that's you. Have an idea, brainstorm your ideas, have a look at the content, start thinking out what you're going to write. When you get to 3 weeks before, which is pretty soon, you need to make an essay plan and work out from those initial ideas what you're going to include, what you're going to take out. You should be doing your research. starting to find articles to support what you want to look into. 2 weeks before, have your draft completed. Check if you're on the right track. Get somebody to read it. Contact Karen Browning or a family friend or someone you know. Are you on the right track? You might need to rewrite it, so you do need to do that 2 weeks beforehand. If you're happy with it, that's great. Once you've got a copy that you're nearly done, just leave it. Go and have a cup of tea or go, have a day off. And so when you come back to look at it again, you're looking at it with a fresh mind. Give it another edit. So if you're doing this long enough before it's due, you can give it an edit. You finish it on the Friday before it's due. You can give it another edit on the Sunday. Take a day off. Give it another edit on the Tuesday. Give it another edit on the Thursday. Give it another edit on the Friday, because every edit will improve your work. So hopefully that helps you guys with approaching this one. I know it was quite long and quite a lot of rambling, but I find that people do often really like very clear instructions on these essays. Naturally, as always, you can speak to your course tutor or to myself for clarification on any of that. But good luck with it, guys. Hope you enjoy researching the topics, and all the best.